Hello viewers, welcome to my channel once again. And today I have a very special guest from the Ugandan art scene, East African art scene, African art scene, and even globally. But before I run into introducing my guest, I will tell you about this garment I'm putting on. It's a backcloth shirt that is made by Senkulu House of Fashions. MARKK is the lead designer there, very talented person. But yeah, today with us we have Matha Kazungu, who is a Ugandan curator and art historian. She holds a master's in arts in African verbal and visual arts with a focus on curating and media in Africa from the University of Bayreuth, Germany. So Matha has been part of several workshops, several exhibitions. She's organized some of them that I could name here. Others I would put the full bio down there. But she has contributed to Phaidon's African Artists from 1882 to now. It's a very good book about African artists. Kazungu has curated exhibitions in Europe and Africa. And there is live classes, an exhibition of Ugandan art on paper in Germany. There's Embodiment of Reason in Uganda. But also Kazungu has been part of the Àsìkò School in Ethiopia and Ghana. So Matha has been part of Independent Curators International, a very important institution with, with curators. She was Assistant Curator for the 2016 Kampala Biennale, created by Elise Atangana. So that's why, the most important reason why we have Matha today is because she just concluded Obulowafe Festival about a month or two ago, and that's why I've been chasing her down for this interview, and I'm very lucky today that we have her here with us today to conversate around these very broad ideas about curating art and Ugandan the art scene. Let's begin with where it might have started for you. You went to Margaret Troll School of Industrial Arts at MARKK University. Art history comes close to two, but there's also no curatorial module taught at the school. What sparked of ideas for you to pursue a curatorial path and not become an artist like most of the students that come out of that prestigious institution?
Thank you so much, Matt, for having me on this platform, and I'm very happy to speak about my life and my work. Yeah. The art school has no curatorial course, but it has a gallery space. And that for me was the beginning of pursuing the curatorial practice, because I never knew about curating before I joined the art school. My childhood dream was always to be a journalist. I wanted to be able to tell stories. So I thought I could tell stories through my art. So I joined the art school. But after a few months of being within the art school at MARKK, I realized I was building a very, very beautiful looking building. And before I knew it, there were things happening on rhythm, exhibition openings, workshops, conferences, even sometimes lectures would be held in this space. And I was very fascinated by the space itself. And one day, I braved my chance to just go and knock on that door. And at that point, there was a curator also. So I was fascinated. Oh, so there's someone called a curator, and they are leading this institution, and they're doing different things. And to my luck, the lady was very, very receptive of my work, of me actually, because then I didn't even have any work. Her name is Catherine Peters-Clapac. She was holding the space as a curator of the gallery. She was making exhibitions, she was doing different things, also teaching us in class. And I was just curious. And I was naive, but also very vulnerable and very open about this. And I told her, I just want to know what you do. And she brought me in. She was very, very, very excited because she told me she had been there for a long time and there hadn't been as many people, or even maybe anyone, that was really curious as to what curating really encompasses. And then, she told me the obvious things: sign up for newsletters, of major institutions, know what's going on. You don't even have to go there. And then as calls came in, because you know how the art world operates, there's lots of calls, so many opportunities, but you have to know someone to share with you that link. She shared with me different links, she told me about Àsìkò School, she literally like took me in. And I took myself seriously, I listened to her, I tried to apply for different things. I think by then you know that there was also 32 degrees east, and you know, we would have chances to go there and have our applications, you know, improved. Forgetting his name now. There was a person there.
At 32 degrees?
Yes. Who would support like applications. He was there for a very long time before he left. I remember the name.
Was this male figure or female?
Male.
Okay. That must have been back in 2012.
Yeah, it's very, very early, about 2013, 14 there. Yeah. But I think when I began applications for myself was 2016, 15, because I was finishing my degree and then I was now able to want to do other bigger things. So really the story was that the art school having a space that is, you know, dedicated to curatorial practice, and having a curator who is leading the space was my entry point in trying to survey what that could mean, and that's how I really got in.
Absolutely. Yeah, Matha, I've been a huge fan of what you've been doing. I remember also I first met you at MARKK, and yeah, I was intrigued by how you were moving. But also seeing you now, I can add things together. I'm like, yeah, there's a reason why she is up there. I love your energy, I love your drive, I love whatever you're doing. It's very important for us on the Ugandan art scene. So you went to study African visual and verbal art, focusing on curating and media in Africa from the University of Bayreuth in Germany, where you were awarded a master's. How does this shape your approach to curating? Maybe you should start by telling us about verbal art. You know, art to be always visual, something you consume with your eyes. But this time you have verbal art in your credentials.
Yeah. I think for me, and I think this is kind of also is evident in my work, I'm really keen on indigenous knowledge systems, on speech, on proverbs, on folk tales, on music, on dance, performative arts, because I feel that in us only focusing on the visual art, we kind of, we don't have the full picture. I feel like all the different aspects of creativity come together to enable our understanding of the art. And that's why I cannot speak for the titles of the course, because of course it was a university that chose the course to be called Verbal and Visual Art, but it makes a very good distinction, you know, when it's not just art, but it's like verbal and visual art, because usually when you speak about art, you assume the visual, right? Many people really just assume the visual, not the verbal. But I've really been interested in having both, you know, having both merge. Like in the recently co-curated festival, which I think you attended in many ways, it was really how do we bring the art to make the other parts of art, to make the performative, the knowledge systems, the, you know, talks, performances, dance, because I feel all of them really complement each other in you know, enabling conversations to be held or moments to be shared.
Absolutely. Interesting. Matha, please tell us, who is a curator, or what does the curatorial role in the contemporary art world demand from somebody? Maybe this could lead us into why there is a deficit of curators on the Kampala art scene.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest problems we suffer from or experience in this country is the lack of a comprehensive meaning of what curating could be. Yeah. But I think that can also be an opportunity to allow different people to forge a meaning of what curating could be, because ultimately there is not one single definition. And there have been, of course, different writers, different authors. Recently, I was reading Bonaventure Ndikung's book about, delusions of care, and he was explaining the different aspects of curating. And of course, there's the curating, which is cura for care, right? But of course, he was giving different aspects of this care, calling it delusions of care. Because, of course, we forefront the care, but with a lot of misinformation, with a lot of double meanings, that is, at some point, there's always a compromise in achieving this care. And while there are so many interpretations of what curating could be, and while there have been so many proposals from authors and from thinkers, intellects about what curating could be, I think for me, it has come to a place of also asking myself, because next year I'll be turning a decade of curatorial practices.
Wow, congrats.
And it's been a very present question in my mind. What do I want to do? What does it mean for me, in an absence of like a right one accurate answer? And for me, it's really been about bringing together. Curating for me has been about bringing together people, ideas, information, concepts, name it, for a cause. And the cause not always one cause. It depends also on context. It depends also on what's available, because we have to be very honest about what's available. We operate in a place where there is, very few resources, financial resources, but also a lot of wealth in terms of things we can value.
Absolutely.
So thinking about, for me, it's bringing together, convening, and if you've been very, very careful to review my bio and to review the things I've been able to do, it's like I bring people on a very regular basis, the symposiums, the exhibitions, the workshops, the mentorship programs. All this is, for me, ways of curating.
So what is that one thing that that should be done on the Kampala art scene to have us have more the likes of you, have like at least 3 Mathas here?
I think there's a lot happening in Kampala, and I'm very proud. I was telling, this is going to sound a bit made up, but when I met Koyo in March, and she was asking me, oh, you came back? I'm like, yes, I came back. She's like, when did you come back? So I told her, she was like, congratulations for coming back. Because she knows that it's not easy to come back, right? When you find your way out of the country, you make sure to stay there because of obvious reasons, right? But I was telling her it's really a lot happening, and I'm so proud to be here to kind of see it manifest. Because there's so many exhibitions coming up, there is institutions coming up, there is an anger, there is, you see people really interested to do things for themselves, and it's really, really lovely for me to see that. But I think what happens, which is unfortunate, is like small things happening independent of each other. I think I dream of a place where, all the different forces come together to make something that's more enduring and something that's more robust. Because what happens with these small things is then their future is not guaranteed. And this is why if you've been reading your art history properly, spaces die out. It's very easy for spaces to mushroom and come up, but then for them to be sustained, it's very, very difficult. Because of course, for you to be able to run a space equably and with in a way that is professional, there's a lot of, need. You need a lot of needs to manage to do that. And what happens now is like when we come up with our small things, then happening, but on smaller scale, so we cannot, like you're saying earlier when you're talking about, a space for an exhibition. So it's like, if your space is that small, then you have to use that small space for your exhibition, right? But imagine if like spaces came together to say we want this one major thing and it's gonna be co-shared or co-owned to be able to do something that's robust, that is big, and that can also give scale to artists. Because, traveling the world, you see that there are spaces where there is actually space, so that artists can even imagine in their studios that when I make this very huge piece of work, it's going to fit somewhere. But in Uganda today, without any of those spaces, like how do you expect our artists to imagine, for the small walls we have to offer. So I feel like a lot is lost in that. We have small things mushrooming. I think the more we work together as institutions, the more we enable bigger outcomes, and the more we then feed the different aspects of an artistic economy, because of course we have the artworks, we have the artists, we have art schools, there are so many of them. There is hundreds of artists coming out of school every year. But how many art critics, how many curators, how many art historians? So it's for me a very big imbalance, and for that to be responded to, there has to be willingness on the key players to come together for the better.
Absolutely. Togetherness is very important. We've seen it work in so many other areas. Let's adopt that. Matha, your work is strongly focused on elevating women artists.
Yes.
Why do you think it's crucial to focus on women in the art world today?
The question of women, or supporting women, is a very personal one for me, because I grew up in a family of 4, where I have 3 siblings, including myself, that's 4. I don't have a biological sister. So from a very early age, I witnessed the gender roles distribution, right? So as a girl, my parents were very conventional parents who, want to emphasize that the girl does that, the boy does that, and, So from a very early age, I witnessed this, but I did not have the vocabulary to even attack or even coin it. It was just something I saw in the passing and kind of witnessed, but never really got a chance to address it until later on when I was at the university. And for the first time I was living on my own, because earlier it was impossible, you have to be home, right? And I realized it wasn't just about me and my little family back in Uganda. It was a question of several women, several girls in this country. And this was where I thought, I should be able to respond or address this issue in the ways I can. And starting out, of course, I had to think about my own practice, the place that I exist in, which was AtWork. And it was really one-on-one between 2015, 2016, and 2018 when I officially really went in down to actually do something substantial. And how Njabala Foundation was founded is we convened in a place called House of Talent in 2018 September. And the idea really was to speak about, the experiences of women artists in Uganda. There were different women on that meeting at different ages, at different steps in their career. And they all had something to say that was unfair about how they had been treated. If it's sexual violence, or if it's, underpaid checks in comparison to their male counterparts, or if it's like misrepresentation in a group expression with their male counterparts. They had so much to say really about the different violences, if you like, that they were experiencing. And beyond the art world itself, there are even other things that are really ingrained on the social fabric of Uganda. Things like hissing men. I don't know if you know this, but you're moving, you're on your way somewhere, and then a man begins like hissing like a snake, and telling you size young, and all these things. Like all these women knew these things, and there were different stories that they were talking about how like sometimes they even like attacked the person doing that, but the women would be like, even several women would be like this, saying, why should you do that? Why should you attack the man? When the man says that, that's like a compliment, So there's a lot of misinformation, miscommunication, things we've normalized that are not, in my opinion, proper, but because they happen so often and every day, we have kind of normalized them. So that different violences then come on different levels in our families, in the people we trust, but also, in the professional realm. So we discovered that actually had to do something about that, and it was initially I was supposed to curate an exhibition to respond to this. And at that point, I was living in Europe, in Germany, doing my master's. So it was very helpful for me to see Kampala from outside. And I don't know if this is everyone expresses this as this, but for me, living abroad, there's a way it kind of enabled me to see things differently, to see things from the top, rather than when you're in here. And I knew about the Njabala story. I had been told the story all my life, so I knew it. But it never resonated as much as it did at this moment when I was living abroad. And so when I was conceiving the concept for that exhibition, I asked them, how do you feel about the story? Do you think it would be a story that kind of, does justice to the things we've raised in this meeting? And to my surprise, everyone was really, really happy with the story. They were like, oh my God, it fits perfectly. But as you know, everything's not guaranteed. So in as much as we had this concept in place, rich with like meaning, and we had a couple powerful artists, we didn't have the resources to do it. So we had to, of course, begin to fundraise. And they just simply, we didn't really land any significant funding. And when we did get the funding, the pandemic struck. And all the funders withdrew. They're like, we were funding you on condition that the world was normal and everything was happening as we expected. So without that, we have to cancel, unfortunately. And so I figured, if I cannot do this exhibition as a one-off, why not make an institution with that is invested in responding to these problems as we wanted them, as we were addressing them. Not as a one-off, but as a platform that can always do things as and when we have the moment and the capacity to. And that's how Njabala was founded, to be able to intervene at different levels to the problems I told you earlier about. And so now, next year we're turning 5 years, and it's very, very, it's very interesting to look at the things we've been able to achieve in a very short time, the exhibitions, the research projects, the mentorship programs, and of course the community engagement.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for that. Thanks. Congratulations on the recent Oglobafri Festival. Kampala has always been a hub for arts festivals. We've had a Laba Festival, and we still have a Kla Art Festival as the ones that are dedicated to contemporary arts or visual art, for that matter. You've been organizing the annual Njabala exhibition at the MARKK Art Gallery. Why did you see a need to magnify this exhibition into something as big as Oglobafri Festival?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to what we do. Like I said earlier, the idea of the foundation, and I have said this several times, but I think I should re-emphasize it. With the idea of us being a foundation and not an art space or a gallery or a school or whatever, is to allow ourselves, the freedom to do almost anything, as long as we see it fit and fitting of our mission, which is to create safe spaces for women artists to blossom. And so, as we've been able to do the annual exhibition for the past 3 years, at some point it felt like we could do more, and the idea of the festival was to enable this also be able to have different things happening alongside the because we wanted to activate the city a bit more. Because, as you know, not so many Ugandans have the luxury of going into a gallery space because they're really quiet spaces or it's zoned out. We're working at MARKK where you have like a toll fee to enter, where there's like all sorts of things saying, don't come, right? And so many people just never came there. So we wanted, to kind of have an experience where we can have different things happen in different places to allow as many people to know what's going on, but also to allow the different aspects of creativity come together. Like I said earlier on in my talk to you, I'm interested in the visual and the non-visual, and that was a platform for like allowing the different aspects of creativity to come together. But also, one other thing that I felt was necessary to have is a celebration. So if you've seen the previous editions of the ANE, they've been really, really full of emotion, right? We sort of, the first one was about activism, And there's nothing like joyful activism. You know, it's always you're lamenting, you're seeking to be heard, you're saying, listen to me, right? And it's always, you know, dressed in a lot of, I don't know, difficult, you know. And then the second one, which was about rest, without knowing it, we kind of also pulled off a very sad experience, because rest, as you know, in Uganda is okuwumula, and okuwumula is something to do with death, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there are different connotations that kind of became present in that exhibition that weren't even maybe thought about in the curatorial, but kind of, you know, rest, when people think about rest, you know, much as it's a needed thing, and we want to imagine that many women should be able to rest. For so many people, that the show was kind of talking about death, right? Because we're talking about rest. And then the third exhibition, which was like the climax of like emotion, was 2024, when we were talking about grief, which was done by Mirembe. You know, and so just 3 editions were great, and I don't want to underplay them in any way. I really recognize them, and I know we need many of those kind of, you know, topics to be explored, because this is real life for many women. But at the same point, I realized that in us, you know, doing a lot of that, we then lose the main picture, which should also be about, you know, acknowledging our power. Right? Saying, look, beyond all this, we still emerge as powerful people. And society can do a lot to kind of make us feel not that power. But yet it's there, it's eminent. And so we wanted also to say, look, there's power to womanhood. And there's so many things that can justify that and qualify that. And so we wanted also like a celebratory moment to say, look, you know, there is power, there is agency, and there is knowledge. And the folklore, like I was telling earlier, became a big, powerful instrument to relay this, right? Because, of course, it's a familiar story. Many people, if you know your folk tales, you know it. But we're looking at it and saying, you know, it is set in a place of famine. You know, what does Nalongo represent in this story? You know, that there's a famine and she's having a millet field, you know? Because the other stories, like Njabala, from which we are named, Njabala is in a bad place. She's evicted, she's beaten, she's not supposed to be honorable. You're supposed not to be like Njabala. But in Obrawafe, Nalongo is wealthy. She has her millet field in the middle of a famine. That's power for us. And then she's just in the weather birds. You know, that's agency for us. Because usually when women experience any kind of trauma or issues, the normal way is to kind of endure, you know, keep quiet. You talk to your women in the backyard. Don't put your linen in public. You know, these are things that we know. But there's a story of like now agency, of her saying, you know, leave my millet, you know. You know, and then of course the knowledge. How do you know that it's your millet? So this is also like something that becomes very, very important even now as we speak about restitution and bring back our things. It's been a lot of misinformation and people not really knowing their cultural heritage, you know. And a lot of it is just leaving. Even as we speak now, is leaving and leaving and leaving. And yet we are claiming, bring back our things, but they are leaving also. So I think for me, in us approaching all of the things, it's really beginning from a place of knowledge. You know, people know that this is actually value. You know, this is value. This is something that you should value first and foremost. You know, so this then became like the major themes of a festival, but from a place of celebration as well. And there were so many mentorship programs. There still are for curators, you know, for artists. Because this knowledge aspect is very, very, very crucial. It's the thing that enables the other things. You know, about the power, and also about the agency. You have to know first to be able to, Yeah,
very much, very well. Matha, you are leading Njabala Foundation, a fairly new but steadily fast rising institution. on the African art scene. What role do you think art institutions and museums play in shaping the art narratives on the continents of ours?
I think when answering that question, I should think about myself before Njabala was an entity. And there's a limit to what an individual can do, right? Even in lobbying for support or in being heard and understood. An institution enables you to be in rooms that you cannot be as an individual. And I think institutions should really not really abuse their power, but should be invested in enabling spaces for the different people in society, be it artists, be it curators, be it all sorts of thinkers, spaces to just thrive and blossom. And that's what Njabala is doing. And you know, it's sometimes it's very painful work, you know, but it's necessary, it's relevant that we equip our people with the right tools that they need to navigate. So I think institutions should really be able to outdo themselves. They should be able to not really undermine their power because they have the capacity to do different things, to change narratives, to create opportunities, to, you know, even speak to all sorts of injustices that exist in the art world today.
Yes, very well put. Like we've seen in your projects with the Njabala Foundation, you make use of indigenous knowledge system in form of folklores that form the basis of your interactions within the conceptual framework of your exhibitions. How important is this to you as a curator, and how do you reconcile with the issue that African indigenous knowledge systems have always been negatively portrayed by the Western frames of thought? So yeah, how do you go about that? How does your work recognize that, you know, the Western frames of thought have always put African knowledge, indigenous knowledge systems, you know, they put them down, they've stepped on them? Or is this something that is important to you in your work? Is this something you really think about? Yeah.
I think for me it comes down to value. So much has been done to us, you know, and I don't want to re-echo all the colonialism and all that. But what was taken, you know, a lot of which was taken, continues to be taken even now.
Yeah, like you say that.
In the perceptions, in how we see our lives, in how many young people hate their names.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Wow.
And they twist their names to be like some kind of, I don't know. There's a lot of things, there's so many things that have been done, and it's sad to witness, you know, at how we've been taught to hate ourselves, to hate our color, to hate our hair, to hate our names, to hate our languages. And for me, all this is value. You know, talking about knowledge before, all this is value, all this is kind of, you know, indispensable in allowing us to live as full, you know, as human beings, right? And so, for me, feeding from these folk tales and from these proverbs and sayings is one way of reminding our people. You know, so many white people struggle to pronounce Njabala. You know, they just can't put the N and the J.
J. It's interesting.
And I care, but you know, it's a name.
You're making them say that.
You know, and each time I'm allowed to speak, I speak about it, even if it's just one word, Njabala. And I feel so good about myself because we have to do the work of undoing. Oh yeah. You know, and it's a lot of work. It's painful work. Sometimes it comes with a lot of criticism because people have been indoctrinated to hate these things, so they don't see the value, right? So we have the undoing of like, on the perspective level to say, look, this is actually you, this is honorably you, you know, to then again saying, okay, so now that this is you, what can we do about this, right? So things like Oblowafe or Njabala, or I don't know what will come next, is really to say there is power in our heritage, and and there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of lessons learned. For us to be called Njabala and think about the different aspects of our story that could be lessons, you know, like just pulling it apart and saying, you know, why is it that it's Njabala's mother's fault that Njabala is not working, you know? Why is it that even in death, it's Njabala's mother who is called upon, right? Can you even imagine that? How problematic that is, that even in death, a woman is still responsible, right? And why is that when she comes back, she's not actually, you know, asking the husband to be lenient on the daughter, but she's actually doing what the husband wants to do. You see what that means? And that's why so many women are uncomfortable with our work, right? Because they've known difference. We just cannot come now and tell them, oh, okay, now this is, you can actually be empowered, or you can feel empowered, because it's nothing. They don't know about this. They haven't experienced it, and why should it matter now if it hasn't mattered all their lives? So there's a lot of things that are interconnected, and for me it's a lot of undoing, really. That I feel like these folklore, these indigenous systems can kind of sustain in that work that we have to do.
Very interesting. For what I understand is that you're digging into this indigenous knowledge system, this folklores, is you partly critiquing them, you know, partly tearing them down, partly, you know, raising them up to be, you know, heard or understood. So it's very much a two-way thing, or a three-way or a four-way thing. So
and there is no one way, by the way. This is also one thing you were asking me about curating. I told you there wasn't one way of doing things, and this is also why we should be able to see this as an opportunity in our careers. There is so many ways. You just have to know why you're doing it, right? Because the room is too small for one way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many ways to go on something, to eat a pie or to do anything. In attending one of the workshops during the Obnoba Free Festival, I was intrigued by the conversation that took place during the Cultivating Legacies talk. Within this, mentorship came up as an important aspect we all ought to think of as art practitioners in this young industry. How do you approach this, and what do you think the up-and-coming artist or curator needs to do today, needs today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of founder syndrome in the art world, where it's
what is that?
Founder syndrome is like, I'm the founder, so I have to do everything, and no one else can do it. And what that happens that when you are away, then that thing comes to a standstill. And I think that's what Andrew was talking about when he said that we have to mentor our successors. And so what Njabala does to this, and I told you earlier, we exist in 4 main pillars. There's exhibition, there's mentorship, you know, there is research, and then there is community. And mentorship is very, very key on that, because, you know, Uganda is a very young country.
Very much.
Politically, but also, you know, in our
the population
people, we have very many young people who have to be mentored, right? So this was for us very intentional from the beginning. And if you've been observant, we have had residencies where we have the artists, you know, be in place for a long time to kind of like work on a body of work, you know, and in the meantime meeting experts, meeting mentors. And even now, as I speak to you, we are having an ongoing mentorship program for East African curators. And this was born from like, you know, why is East Africa left out? You know, if you look at the Africa from the top, you see that there are different places which are constantly
showing up
on top. And East Africa is constantly coming at some point of that. So I think we have the artists, of course. I cannot say anything bad about that.
Very much.
But we need the different pillars to kind of, you know, enable these artists to be able to tell their stories or to mediate the artist stories. And so we thought, you know, Curators would be a good place to start. And so we have 6 curators mentored by 6 other curators. And meanwhile, there's also like public events within this mentorship program. So within the festival, there was a talk by Bonaventure, Njikung, who was speaking as a guest lecturer for the mentorship program, but also it was a public event that many people could attend and listen. It was a very, very, heartfelt speech that was talking about curating and care and all these things. And next month in June, there will be a talk by Ngoni Fall, which also will be a public talk, so not only for the mentees and the mentors, but also for the general public. So that's also a good thing that's happening there. And this month was supposed to have a talk by, the late Koyo, and I think we should have a moment of silence for that. May her soul rest in peace. She had agreed to speak to the mentees this particular May, on the 13th of May. And hers was going to be a private talk because she wanted to be able to interact with the mentees on a more personal level, which is sometimes not possible in a public realm. But you see, the idea really is to equip them with young people, because it's people from different parts of East Africa, so Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Uganda. And there's more of this. We're constantly interested in this kind of arrangements, even for the respondents to the annual open call. I don't know if you know about this. So every October, we run an open call for artists, and depending on who applies, we make a selection, and those people have a full year of kind of residency at the foundation, leading to the exhibition in the following year. So during this time, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of meetings, team building. Sometimes they need like one-on-one with a mentor, someone they always wanted to reach out to, but they can't as an individual. So again, the institution then comes in, so us as Njabala, we can write to someone and be like, hey, could you be interested, And the same for all this. I don't know if it was just Matha somewhere randomly writing to, Ngone or Bona or, the late Koyo. It's a different dynamic altogether. That's what I was saying. Institutions should have that capacity to also lobby for their own people, because it holds more ground than an individual reaching out. Yeah, so we're constantly interested in this aspect of mentorship, because we know that we need to be able to multiply the capacity for different people so that they can sustain this when we're not there. Also, when you're there, I don't see myself at the forefront of Njabala like all my life. At some point, I have to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have to let someone else.
You don't want to be like Museveni?
No. No, and I really hope for a time when I can lead it to a place where I can be independent, and I just, pop in and pop out without feeling like I should be there. Absolutely. That's how I think should be.
In order, with the most important coming first, art schools, museums, galleries, collectors. What do you think the Ugandan / the African art scene needs first? What is the most pressing of these four? Art schools, museums, galleries, collectors. What do we need?
I would say art schools that are more diverse, because art is not just about the artist. Because then, if they can do a 360 and then equip, teach conservators, teach curators, teach writers, teach art historians, then that's actually, for me, what we need. Because currently our art schools are just focusing on the art, which is brilliant, but at the expense of the other aspects. And I'm really keen on empowering people. Like, we can have all these buildings. If there is no manpower, if there is no critical voice to run them, then it comes down to zero for me. So intellectual power, equipping people, for me, is what I would choose. And I think a school should be able to do that much more than anything else on that list.
But we have Makerere University, Makerere Art School.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Diverse schools that are giving everything, and not this that, because also our schools are struggling, with like with their really difficult modules. With us learning about Da Vinci and whatnot. Think about what Black Salines is doing. Think about what's going on.
I was there.
I
witnessed that.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
You know what that means for the people, for the artists, when they can come down to their studios and feel that, you know, in solitude. You know what that means? You know how many Ugandan artists are struggling with doubt and with like not knowing where to go? Do you know how that feels?
I know, I've been there.
So it's for me, it comes down to that. It comes down to training, and I think people need more of that, and our spaces should be able to do that. For them. And when that for me is in place, that everything else kind of falls in place, because then people know where to go, people know how to lobby. There can be many more institutions that are founded or initiated or co-founded, you know. But the mindset, the intellectual power is key in enabling this.
How about collectors? How about patrons? Don't you think the canvas is important in this equation?
We need them. You asked me to rank, right? So I think the Art School is right.
It's up there.
We need
museums,
I didn't
institutions?
say this enough, but we need a balanced
ecosystem. Absolutely.
You know, where if I have the ANE coming up, I'm sure that at least 50% of the artworks are going to be acquired.
Oh yeah.
Right? And I haven't sold one ANE exhibition artwork since we were founded. Of course, we're not exhibiting to sell, but I'm curious to hear someone say, could I have that?
Oh, yeah.
Could I have that in my house? Because then this supports a woman artist. And that's not there. So because of the few collectors in place who have to be, you know, courted, switch talked, invite, you know, all those things. And the people, of course, who are doing it as a business, who have known all the tricks.
Yeah.
But for a person like me, I have no clue, you know, so I'm like, this is the work, you see it, if you like it, if you don't like it, it's still the work. So I think if we're at a place where we have like, you know, collectors that we can always say, is this coming up, are you interested?
Yeah.
Functional museums, that would be also nice. You're telling me earlier about why you have a problem with major artists having their show retrospectives in galleries.
In galleries, no.
And not in those kind of spaces. And I'm like, where are they? You know, so we need a balanced distribution of these core pillars of a functional ecosystem.
Absolutely. Matha, can you please share any upcoming projects or initiatives you're particularly excited about? Without spilling so much beans. What should we look out for?
I think we should look out for, of course, the ANE 2026. Preparations already underway. We already have like themes in place. Now, really production. So, ANE come March 2026, we'll be having the ANE as usual. ANE is in the annual Njabala exhibition. And then also we are working also on the Karibu project. So this is something that I'm really okay, everything I do is of course close to my heart, but I'm really interested to see how this project unfolds. If you've been observant in Kampala or in different parts of Uganda, you should have realized that our indigenous art is fading out. Because they're plastic substitutes, which are more flamboyant, with color and soft to touch, and you know, every disadvantage to our mat, because it's a bit rigid, it's, you know, coming from palm leaves and whatnot. And so the project we are doing in Karibu is really to revive this mat, the indigenous mat, and by keeping people who do the mat. So we're working mostly with artisans, women in rural places of Uganda who otherwise do not have access to market. Because if you look at the cost of the indigenous mat, in terms of the time you take to make one mat, or there is the cost of the plastic one, you know, it's like a very big difference, of which, you know, they need weeks to create that mat. And if they cannot be rewarded for the time they invested, then there's no point in doing it. And this is why it will be a matter of time until this mat just runs out completely, because there's no point in doing it. And beyond the, you know, the time to it, also the wetlands are drying up. If you've seen, there have been so many swamps that have been, you know, yeah, dried up because people have to use them for other things or plant things that make sense rather than palm leaves. So in rural places, most of them have been, you know, used mostly for rice farming, so the palm leaves are cut down. And in other places, just climate change happens and it's not there anymore. So I'm really, really keen on this whole 360 degrees from how the palm leaves grow to how they are harvested to how they are then transformed into the mat and then to that mat finding homes. So this is something I'm very, very interested in, and this is what's happening now. And yeah, I'm excited.
This is a very good idea. I mean, the mat dying out. I mean, we know one of the artists uses the mats in their work, Pamela Achai. So yeah, this could be something. Next thing, you know, in the next coming years, 10 years, one mat like that could be, I don't know, $10,000 or something like that. Yeah. Some crazy amount at the Sotheby's auction or what. Anyway, Martha, thanks for having us in this your wonderful abode. Thanks for having this conversation with me. I hope you've always been tuned in all through the conversation and you picked a lot from this wonderful guest we had today. What you do is stick around and watch out for more content coming from me. I'll try as much as possible to interview the most important people in the Kampala art scene, but also East African, also Africa when there's a possibility to do that. What you do is just like and subscribe and probably share the video around. Yeah, thanks. Ciao.